People moving from Hong Kong to the United Kingdom. How do you get a job in the UK? And indeed, how do you secure a home? Well, that is a great question and one that is answered in this video. So one of the questions that we'll always be asked about moving from Hong Kong to the UK is jobs and homes. And if you are already in Hong Kong, you move into the UK, you might want to think about, well, am I better to hang fire, go out to the UK, find out where I want to live, and then apply for a job? Or should you have a job lined up? And we'll discuss that as a panel. But the other subject we're going to talk about is buying a home and getting a mortgage. So let's start, Chenji, from the research and your own perspective, because you've moved from country to country quite frequently. So you've got some very good experience to tap into here. But people that are looking to move from Hong Kong and going into the UK, how easy is it to just get a job? Let's say that you're in the office environment, you're an investor, etc. How easy is it to get a job in the UK?
Simon, thanks for the question. And I'm going to be brutally honest here. It will not be easy, and I think this applies to anywhere in the world these days. Be it in the US, be it in Hong Kong itself. Finding a job, a good job, a well-paying job, is always extremely difficult. The UK in particular, right? People would have seen in the news that there is a shortage of labour that's going on in the UK. But mainly the shortages are related to lower skilled labor. For example, professions such as lorry drivers, professions such as in the hospitality industry, in restaurants, in leisure, right, where people are where there is a shortage of labor. However, in the more we call white collar jobs, the office job, desk jobs, there isn't really a shortage, and in fact, youth unemployment has been quite high. People graduate from universities and they can't find employment. That's going on at the moment in the UK. So, but obviously, the advantage that the Hong Kongers who are moving here have is that most of them are already very highly qualified. They have had, oftentimes more than 10 years of experience in the workforce. Most of them have a university degree. Some of them have master's degrees, right? So these are all strong skills to use in terms of seeking for employment. The biggest advice I would give, and having personally gone through these, searching for jobs across different countries, is have a business plan for yourself, right? And this feels like more of a personal development. How can you create, using your skills, how can you create demand for a certain type of service that you're hoping to do in the UK? So rather than just dropping resumes across 100, 200 different companies, right, and maybe one or two will reply to you, try to again think about, come up with a business plan for yourself, how I can create more demand in this field that I'm hoping to specialize in. And I think this will work a bit better in the UK.
I think there's a couple of things that I personally would add to that as well. We talk about demand, we talk about sources of employers or just people that can help you get jobs. In the UK, we do rely upon heavily. We as an accountancy firm rely very heavily on recruitment agents. So one of the things you could do is look for recruitment agents in the UK that's in your specialist field. So companies like Robert Half, Hayes cover a different spectrum of job vacancies. The one platform that anyone from Hong Kong looking for a job in the UK could look at is Indeed, indeed.co.uk. The one thing I picked up on was talking about demand. Obviously, if you're in an existing job, one of the things that you could do is to talk to your employer already and say, well, actually, I'm going to move to the UK. Is there an opportunity for me to do remote working or change my job? So change the geographics of my job and then talk to your HR specialist in that company. I mean, is that possible, Chenji, from your perspective?
Yes, indeed, especially after this pandemic that we've been through or still ongoing. Remote working has been as easy to propose as ever before with the amount of technology that's out there. So, and in fact, I recently read a study, a survey of people of Hong Kongers who have already moved to the UK. In it, it does say actually just about over 20% of people who have moved here have kept their jobs in Hong Kong. So they're working in the UK, moving in the UK, enjoying all the infrastructure in the UK, but working and their job in Hong Kong. Now, obviously, it's very important that you propose this before you move here, right? So you have that certainty, both for income and your career, before you make that choice. And I believe, actually, this decision also ties into if you're thinking about buying a property potentially, because, having an income is quite important. Having a source of income is quite important in this regard, I believe, Simon.
Yeah, indeed.
Sorry, I'm going to just dovetail another question if at the same point and change it before you answer it. Obviously, when we talk about jobs, is it better to have a UK job if you're buying a home in the UK and you need a mortgage? Is it better to have a job in the UK, or could you still get a residential mortgage if you have a job in Hong Kong?
It's going to be infinitely more easy if you've got employment and pay based in the country of origin that you're trying to get the mortgage in. Yeah, massively easier. I think is the short answer. I don't think there's a long answer to that one.
And how long would you need to show that you've been employed in the UK? Because obviously someone coming over to the UK might want to start looking for houses straight away, because it's to coin a phrase from Chenji earlier, it's exotic. So it's quite interesting, it's quite exciting. But they might not be able to get a mortgage straight away when they move over.
No. Okay, you would need at least 6 months worth of continuous employment to have cleared any probationary periods within the company in order to better then usefully take that income on and have it used and assessed by a lender. However, I think that kind of nicely dovetails into, if you move into a new country, the UK isn't, I suppose it's a fair bit larger than Hong Kong. So geographically, there are quite a few different places around the UK you could potentially look to move out. London is naturally a big draw, but it doesn't have to be where you go to. So renting isn't necessarily a bad thing to do when you first arrive on these shores, I don't think, because it then allows you to more refine where it is you think you might ultimately want to stay, and buy potentially. I can't imagine having to research Hong Kong, try and work out where I would like to live, and then buy, and then kind of arrive there and go, do you know what, actually, over there is actually where I want to be. Yeah. And the process of buying a house, selling a house, is quite expensive. You need to own the house for a reasonable amount of time before you actually get back the money you've invested buying it and or selling it. Housing, as with any kind of illiquid asset, there's a buyback period, i.e. you've got to hold it for a certain amount of time for it to make sense. So renting isn't as bad as it might first seem or sound, and especially then helps you get around any mortgage hurdles that will naturally just be there in front of you. If it's investment property, that's a bit different. You can start and hit the ground running with investment property pretty much straight away.
Well, that's a separate video, I'm sure, for that one there, Simon. But Chenji, you obviously rented a property where you live. How did you hear about that property? Because again, someone from Hong Kong moving over to the UK, very different from Hong Kong. Where would you go find a property that's up for rent?
Great question. Great question, Simon, both Simons. And for me, actually, I had that same conundrum. I moved here just over 2 years ago now, and I just didn't know, I didn't feel comfortable committing to purchase a house. I didn't know where the housing price, where the housing market was going. I didn't know which area I really wanted to live in particular. I know my personal circumstances could change, right? In terms of families and, things such as that. So I've given myself the decision that renting actually makes more sense. Now, the first place I have looked in, it's called ridemove.co.uk. It's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, online property platform for both buying and selling and looking for rental properties. So it's quite easy. You get online. There's a app for that as well, and you just look at the area. You can look at the properties. You can arrange viewings, get in touch directly with either estate agents or private tenants, so private landlords. you do have to make sure is, especially if you do have an employment, if you are employed in the UK, right? Oftentimes if you're renting, the landlord requires a lot of documentation to prove that you can pay rent, you can sustain rent for a very long time. And I know in Asia, in particular, people tend to want to pay oftentimes a big amount of rent up front. But in the UK, because of certain regulations in the landlord legislation, landlords oftentimes don't want to accept a lump sum of money beforehand. They actually want an ongoing is that you pay on a monthly basis and have a guarantor, for example. So there's quite a few nuances that you have to be careful of in this. And again, happy to share any advice on this part.
I think just to add to that, if you're moving into a rented accommodation, these typically gives something called an AST, which is a short holds tenancy, which is typically 6 months. So if you are going to a property, you are kind of fixed for 6 months. You can have it extended. Typically, I know the property I'm in, funny enough, I'm being rented because I'm still looking for a home for myself. I know you're probably looking at me thinking, 46, man, you need to get a grip. But I actually sold a home and I'm just looking for a different home altogether. But you do need to be in a property for 6 months, but I've agreed a 12-month contract to stay in a property for that period of time. So there's flexibility, but typically it's minimum 6 months and going 12 months. Just to touch on back to jobs, because I think I do like the flicking around these two subjects of jobs and homes in the UK. But let's talk about something else. I mean, you talked about innovation, the way the market's going, Chenji. I personally feel that there's a lot more flexibility in terms of the way people are working. I think we may be going towards more of an American market that was been there for about 5-10 years, whereby people are more freelancers. You talked about creating a demand. I mean, is it possible for someone to create, to look at the internet, to see that there's a gap in the market, to capitalize on that market whilst they're in Hong Kong and then continue that business in the UK?
Yes, definitely. I strongly believe in this. I mean, with all the technologies out there, we're in a decentralized economy. There's no more central corporation delegating all these different types of resources and labor to different parts of the world. No, not anymore. There's a platform for that. Or actually, there's an app for that. Right? You download an app, you advertise your own sort of skills, and people across the other end of the world will buy it, will purchase it from you. And especially actually like, many personal clients as well, personal experience, e-commerce, extremely huge going sector at the moment. You are living in Hong Kong, you have the resources, you have the connections, maybe from previous employment of service providers. You come to the UK, use those connections, and you create a bridge, and that is called an e-commerce, using electronic platforms to facilitate either trade of goods or services between different borders. And that, again, is something you can already create in Hong Kong, find the right resources in the UK to advertise your services, right? And you can actually make quite a good income from this, creating your demand.
I think that's a good. A couple of platforms I'm aware of is Fiverr.
Yes, Fiverr.
I think that's FIVRR, if I'm correct. And the other one is People Per Hour, PPH. And they are global platforms, as you say. They're not just held to the UK. So it's certainly worth having a look at that. So I mean, from a residential mortgage, again, we talk about resi mortgages here. But if someone is from Hong Kong, has this get up of self-employment, moving over to the UK with their self-employment business that they can transfer, how long typically, we talked about home mortgages, when you have a job, 6 months is typically a requirement, but I think it's a bit more stringent for self-employed.
Yeah, so typically, lenders would be looking for a minimum of 12 months worth of books and accounts, and particularly, they might well extend that to 18 or 24 months if you've moved from overseas and set a new business up in the UK. Because there are a number of other factors around that business, so you kind of getting on. So if you were self-employed, it's definitely more difficult. You might lean on the rental market a little more heavily, I think, in the earlier months. But yes, it's doable. For sure. Particularly, I suppose, some of the larger banks, international banks, HSBC, etc., can help in that perspective. And from your home, your origin country, sorry, I can't get the words out. So you could potentially get it pre-agreed, HSBC in Hong Kong, a mortgage for the UK, because it might be that you're continuing the business that you're doing in Hong Kong in the UK or that field. So quite often bypassing the UK broker and working back in your home country can pay dividends, to be fair.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, guys, for those answers.